Welcome back to WHIP, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station. On the line with us today, we have a very special guest. His name is Mike Sielski. He writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Daily News, and he went to LaSalle University. He's a local product. Mike, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. How's it going? Little technical difficulties there, Mike. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. How's it going?
Doing great, Zach. Thanks for having me on. There's never technical difficulty when you play more Led Zeppelin.
Dang right. I like your style. We have you on today to talk some Jahlil Okafor. You wrote an article this past week about the events surrounding Okafor in Boston this past weekend. And apparently, news broke immediately after. He was driving over 108 miles an hour on the Walt Whitman Bridge, I believe. Mike, you're seeing all this unfold. Jahlil Okafor is basically the best thing to happen to this city in what many people can remember. He's a third overall draft pick. What do the Sixers need to do to protect this guy?
Well, there's a report out there now that they've hired a bodyguard for him, which has been disputed. ESPN is reporting that they've hired a personal bodyguard for him, and TMZ is saying they have not. So I think it would be a good thing if they did. I think that once the incident in October in Old City took place where somebody waved a gun in his face or threatened, put a gun to his head outside a club in Old City, that the Sixers should have acted then, and they didn't. They knew about the incident, and, I don't know what discussions they had with Jahlil, but nothing came of them to the point where, the night last Wednesday that they lose in Boston, he's able to go out to a club with teammate Christian Wood and get involved in the second incident, which gets recorded on video and posted on TMZ. So, it's possible that Jahlil balked at wanting a bodyguard in the wake of the October incident with a gun.
Right.
But the Sixers should have pressed him, I think, if they didn't, and really should have made it non-negotiable. Like, look, you're too valuable to us. You're young. You're 19. You're going to screw up, and that's part of the reason we kind of need to keep an eye on.
Preach. Yes, he's young, he's 19, he's going to screw up, and that happens. He's human. This is kind of a human thing for Jahlil. He's so recognizable. This fake ID thing is just, it's laughable, frankly, because he's Jahlil Okafor. I sincerely doubt if he really wants to go somewhere, he's going to have issues getting in somewhere. Because, unfortunately, that's, from like a red flag perspective, that's just the way athletes are in today's world. You can just kind of do what you want to do. Going forward, though, do you think this will have an effect on his performance?
I don't know. It's hard to say in that regard. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles it. If his performance declines, if he's not playing as well as he has been, that would certainly be worth noting. You can be of two minds about him being 19 and these incidents happen. Say, well, he's 19 and these incidents are going to happen and there's nothing you can do about it because he's 19. And the other way you can go is the way I kind of look at it, which is, yeah, he is 19, which means you have to create some kind of structure within your organization so that he can flourish, so that he can retain some freedom and yet keep himself safe. That is a fine line that teams have to walk with rookie players, with young guys. And there are ways to do it. There are firms, at least one, that teams and players can contract that will, offer security without, while maintaining confidentiality toward the team. One of the things that you talk to guys around the NBA and other leagues will tell you is that, I don't want the team employed security force following me around because it feels like, the team is keeping an eye on me all the time. Well, there are companies, independent companies, where you don't have to do that. They'll follow you around. They keep what you do confidential, and as long as you show up to practice on time the next day, everything's fine. So I don't know what measures, if any, the Sixers took to try to keep him protected. I just know at this point they haven't done a very good job, and it is going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. Does this play slough off? Does he, do these incidents keep coming up? I'd like to think he's a smart enough, relatively mature enough kid that things are different from here on out.
Hey, Mike, this is JT once again. Thank you for joining us. Just to, reference back to what you said about how they were handling, you see a lot of these rookies coming out in the league, since they added the rule that you have to go to college. Now, you don't see people coming straight from high school, but these guys are still 18, 19 years old, just regular college kids. could you possibly see the NBA maybe stepping in to try and police these younger players that are under the age of 21 that aren't technically legal in the sense that they have their own set of guidelines for them?
I don't see how you would do that. I mean, I'm not a proponent of the 1 year plan like it's got now. I mean, my feeling is that that you have to have 1 year of college ball, or you have to be of a certain age. I mean, if you're 18 and an NBA team is willing to draft you or sign you, you should be able to go play in the NBA. If you want to go to college, then I'm perfectly fine with the league saying, well, if you choose to go to college, you have to stay X number of years or whatever the case may be. And I'm not sure how you would, work around labor law to make that happen. But, I don't see how you do that. I mean, that sort of thing has to be collectively bargained. And, I'd have to see what the players' union would be willing to give. I know that the league is not real happy with what the Sixers have done so far in terms of kind of creating an atmosphere for these young guys. I mean, let's face it, they don't have anybody on their roster older than 24. And while it's one thing to say, okay, we have a security force and these guys can use it if they want to use it. It's another thing to kind of create an environment where, look, guys are encouraged, look, we need you to be responsible. We want you to be responsible. Here are the resources we have in place. We encourage you to use them. There is a bit of kind of a, young kids running the frat house sort of atmosphere, I feel like, with the Sixers right now. That, what you've heard about with Embiid last year and now Okafor this year. Nerlens Noel has been signed for lateness. It's. I think they've got to kind of, gather themselves and kind of get this under a little bit better control.
Yeah, I mean, once again, we're talking. Oh, sorry. There's something lost in my throat. Just one quick more question here. Like you said, it's kids running the frat house, basically. There's nobody over the age of 24. Could you possibly see the Sixers bringing in a veteran free agent, maybe trading for one in the near future? Just, a guy that's been established in the league. He doesn't have to be, an old-timey veteran, like a Tim Duncan type 35-year-old, but just like a 29, 30-year-old to come in and, kind of show these young guys the ropes, how to act in the NBA, how to go about, what they're doing.
I think it would be, it could potentially be a good thing on two levels. Number one, for all the reasons you just cited. Number two, it might help them win a few games. I mean, if you get a good enough player, who can actually help you on the court and who can settle things down in practice and give these guys some guidance. Again, I understand that there are certain Sixers fans and media members out there who poo-poo this idea of like, oh, you bring in some old head and he's going to tell Jahlil Okafor what to do. Give me a break. Jahlil's 19. He's not going to listen. But, I look at it like you have a choice. You can have somebody there who might be able to help you bring these guys along, or you can have nobody, in which case you have no chance of anybody really helping bring these guys along. You're just kind of relying on the guys themselves to mature. And, to me, that's no choice at all. If you have a chance to bring in a guy who can advise and lend some perspective to these younger players, you do it. I mean, I think, Luke and Mbamute last year did a pretty good job of that. And they decided not to bring him back, and that's fine. But I do think I don't know that Sam Hinkie will do that, but I think it would be worth his while to do.
We're talking with Philadelphia Inquirer and Philadelphia Daily News writer Mike Sielski about some Sixers. Mike, you mentioned how this team is just losing. It's pretty miserable. It's gotten to the point where head coach Brett Brown has initiated something called Premortem, something that really has never been heard of before. Quote, Premortem is, so I think that when you anticipate possibilities that we are going through, we're going to have a thing called Premortem. If we're going to die, how's it going to be? And we talk freely about it, end quote. This is literally during games. That is literally the state of Philadelphia sports in a nutshell. Like, my dad always told me when I was a kid, just brace yourself, You still got to go to work next day. You still got to go to school. Philadelphia is rough. Now, what do the Sixers have to do to get that first win? Is it tonight? What do they have to do?
They have to hope Kobe Bryant wants to put on a show for his hometown Sixers fans, and he ends up shooting about 3 for 20. They're favored in tonight's game, which gives you an indication of how good or bad the Lakers have been this season. Look, it's going to come on a night when another team just kind of says, "Yeah, we can just roll the basketballs out there and we'll beat the Sixers." And And it'll come on a night, I think, when a guy like Robert Covington or Isaiah Cannon just, has an incredible night and hits 8 or 9 three-pointers, and no matter who's guarding him, it doesn't matter. He just rains 27-footers down, and things work out that way. How often that's going to happen this season, I don't know. I mean, the league record for the worst season in NBA history, as you guys know, is the 72-73 Sixers. They went 9-73. It's really hard to see this team, as it's constituted right now, winning 9 games. And I think it's going to get harder as the year goes on because these other teams aren't going to want to be the team that loses to them. And as if that weren't the case already. I mean,
right.
Who wants to be that first loss to the Sixers? So I don't know. To answer your question about when they're going to get that first win, there aren't any games on the schedule where you look at them and go, oh, yeah, like they'll win that game, or that's a night where they could. Look, they were ahead in the fourth quarter in, 5 of their last 6 games, and they couldn't pull out any one of them. So it's going to be a long, long slog.
It almost seems a little fishy the way they're losing some of these games. I mean, they have the lead with 2 minutes to go, and it's a relatively comfortable lead, 5-6 points. Then all of a sudden, boop, it's gone. But hey, that's Sixers basketball, and that's the plan.
Because they don't have any guards. I mean,
right.
You have Okafor who presumably can get you easy buckets in the low post, but you have to get him the ball in the low post. And T.J. McConnell and Isaiah Cannon and Hollis Thompson are not breaking down anybody off the dribble or, not good enough necessarily outside shooters, to create space for Okafor to get the ball. And so, you have these frantic, possessions in the final 2 or 3 minutes of the game where they're just chucking up shots with 1 or 2 seconds left on the shot clock. And the other team comes down, runs its offense, gets buckets, and wins the game.
You mentioned how the Sixers were 9-73 way back when. Me and JT were talking about this earlier in the show. What's more likely? Will the Golden State Warriors reach that 70-win threshold, or will the Sixers tie or break that losing record?
Oh, I think it's more likely the Sixers will tie or break that record.
Oh, man. I
do. I mean, look, I love the Warriors. Love watching them play. I think it's great for the league. I think, Steph Curry is the cuddliest little superstar the league has ever had.
He's a legend of the making.
Yeah, exactly. But, I just think it's going to be harder for them to win 73 games. I mean, there isn't that much of a gap between them and the rest of the league. In, say, the way the 95-96 Bulls were with Jordan, a year back after his retirement, and Pippen and Rodman and that deep bench. They were just head and shoulders above everybody in the NBA that year. And while the Warriors are great, they're not that much farther ahead. You've got the Thunder with Durant and Westbrook. You've got the Spurs. You've got LeBron out there. There's going to be opportunities for them to lose games. So I think the gap up, from the Sixers to the rest of the league is wider than the gap from the Warriors down to the rest of the league.
Okay. I want to bring it back to the Sixers real fast. Mike, you've been highly critical of the Sixers and their process. So let me ask you.
Actually, I haven't. No, actually, let me correct you. That's not entirely true. I've been in my columns. I've been more supportive of the process than a lot of people. What I'm having trouble with now is, these sorts of incidents have shown that they don't seem to have an infrastructure in place to handle these young guys that they're trying to acquire to draft. I like the idea of being bad and getting high draft picks,
right?
And what the payoff could be down the road. But if you're going to do that, you've got to have a better infrastructure within your organization in place to deal with these young guys. And I think the Okafor incident showed that they didn't have that in place.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. They're absolutely kind of running wild right now. It's definitely cause for concern. So you do trust the process. At which point, give me a year, do you foresee the Sixers potentially making the playoffs?
I think potentially in 3. The fact that they're 0-18 and are embarrassing right now is obscuring the fact that they could have as many as 4 first-round draft picks next year. Now, it's also obscuring the fact that Dario Saric comes over, on schedule next year, and that Joel Embiid may or may not be healthy. Now, that can change things relatively quickly. Is it going to change them instantaneously? No, I don't think so. But I do think that the fact that everybody is fixated on them and this incredibly bad losing streak is forgetting that they can still get to where they want to go. The issue I have with the process now is that the longer and the worse, the longer you were involved in the rebuild and the worse you are in that rebuild right now, the better the better you have to be once you get good, and the longer you have to be good to justify the process.
Right.
If they come out of this and have one season where they win 50 games and get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that's as good as it ever gets, then it doesn't justify what they did. But if they come out of this and become the Spurs and win 5 championships over 2 decades and become the model of excellence in the NBA, well, that's something different. But that's a really, really, really high standard to meet. So, and the longer they're in this level, the longer they've got to be at the higher level.
Yeah, hopefully they give Philadelphia something. These fans are starved. It's been brutal. Hopefully Dario Saric comes over and shows some promise sooner than later. But, Mike, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, take care. That was Mike Sielski. He is a Philadelphia Inquirer and Philadelphia Daily News beat writer. He went to LaSalle and Columbia, studied journalism at Columbia. He's a smart guy. Follow him at Mike Sielski on Twitter.